Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Connected Startup. Like we say, every startup is born to solve a problem. The hard part is everything that breaks on the way there. So in the Connected Startup, we talk to startups who discovered a graph was the way through those roadblocks. Each episode traces one company's path from the wall they hit to what they finally could build once their data matched the shape of the problem. So my name is Brian O'Keefe. I am a manager of solutions engineering at Neo4j, focused on our startup program. And today we're going to be talking to Wes Mullins. Wes is the founder and CEO of Icite. Before founding that company, he was CTO at one of the largest managed detection and response providers, where running security operations at scale showed him that identity had quietly become the attack surface. No security information or event management, endpoint detection response platform, or cloud tool could fully see. So I'm going to welcome Wes to the show here. Wes, thanks for joining.
How's it going, Brian? Thanks for having me. Grateful.
Excellent. Hey, can you start out just by telling us a little bit about Icite and what you guys do there?
Yeah, so we are a cybersecurity company, SaaS, cloud-based, focused on what we like to call advanced identity threat detection and response. There's a lot of great vendors out there. There's a lot of great opportunities in the space, but we saw a big gap in people honing in on a very niche market, and we leverage graph to kind of expand that. So being able to do identity plus posture, combining time series data, relational data, graph data allows us to find threats that you can't find with your SIEM or your EDR platform. And we are solely focused on trying to help organizations spot, find, respond to identity threats, with it becoming the most prevalent attack vector in the enterprise.
Awesome. Yeah, cybersecurity is a great use case for graph. Over the years, I worked with many vendors using it. So you talked a little bit about, so you didn't always use graph though, correct? It was kind of, you brought that in later. What was your initial stack that you were using?
Yeah, so using Postgres for structured data, ClickHouse for time series. We still leverage both of those, but it was more of the, what could you do with that versus where did we want to go? And as we continue to do deployments and, you get in, you get feedback from your customer. Most of that feedback will ultimately drive your product roadmap. And it became pretty clear early on, we weren't going to be able to truly understand the relationship between our customers' users as well as the resources in their environment, with just focusing on essentially using SQL to try to put all that together. It was, it would become very obscure behind the scenes, having to have multiple databases to handle session plus state plus user. And at a high level, think of the, hey, we've got Brian does something in an environment. You can get that in time series and do that really well. That's what the modern SIEM market does and has continued to do that and will do that. But then there's the state of Brian, and how has Brian's access changed across a period of time, where we use SCD to do that, which is very hard to do in something like a Postgres or a ClickHouse. And then more importantly, the assets that Brian also has access to, whether that's Salesforce or ServiceNow or GitHub or GitLab, how has his permissions in that app locally changed, as well as the relationship of the config state of that SaaS app? Not just Brian's access to it, but who has gone in there and made fundamental changes. So that's really what led us to, I wouldn't say like anything was breaking or not there, but we knew where we wanted to go, which really was the ultimate decision to say, hey, look, could we accomplish this with the two that we have? Moving to a 3 database data store is, it's a lot. But we also knew that we were going to use agents down the road. That was going to become something that was going to be a little easier, but more importantly, the value that we could provide to the customer. A lot of people can stand up time series and relational, but you're only ever going to solve half the problem without needing to go to other systems to answer extremely complex questions that we know security analysts and incident responders ultimately need to be successful in their job. So tying graph into that to really round out what we would call the infrastructure was ultimately the decision that we made, and couldn't be more happier with it. Neither could our customers.
Okay. So So what is your, if you don't mind me asking, like, what is your gold set of data then? If you're using three databases together, are they, I assume they're not, you got one kind of set of truth and then you derive the other two from that. Is that true?
Yeah, that would good softball there. Yeah, so Neo's what I would say our source of truth for identity resolution. That is the big important thing that we do. Anyone can store structured data in the SOC. Anyone can store time series data in the SOC. But when 90% of every breach, regardless of if it starts at the endpoint, if it starts in the cloud, it starts in SaaS, it starts on-prem, all ties back to an identity. So the ability to resolve who is Brian across multiple IDPs, across multiple local SaaS apps, whether they're SCIM provisioned or they're not, is ultimately where analysts fall down.
Okay.
So we use that as kind of our single source of truth and how we do identity resolution, where we can take the concept of an account maybe that's in Okta, but maybe you also have Entra ID for on-prem. Maybe you have apps that aren't SSO, so they still have local accounts. Then you also have apps that do have SSO, but the way that their logs are generated don't put the email address in it. So when I submit code to GitHub every single day, it's not wes@icite.io, it's wes-github. So the ability to build those relationships across all of the assets in the environment and basically say we have a identity, which is Brian or Wes, but that person may have multiple entities associated with them. That is their account over in GitHub, their account in Okta, their account in Google Workspace, their local account, the account that's tied to either Microsoft Intune or Jamf or Kanji if you're using Mac, and associate all that together to where the analyst has a fundamental one-click button to say, I can know who Brian is, what Brian has access to, how did he get that access, because that's where SCD comes in, and we can show you the changes across a period of time, but then overlay your time series data on top of it to build extremely fast timelines that would take an analyst hours, if not days in some cases, to go stitch that together. And ultimately, they have to pivot from the SIEM to go to the identity providers, to go to the product owners and get things that they can't afford. So using Graph to be that single source of truth for identity resolution on who a user is it a user, is it a non-human identity, is the fundamental core of the product. And that's where Neo comes in.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, normally I would ask, describe the moment when you realized the Graph was the right tool, but it sounds like, yeah, you came into this knowing that, with the requirements that you had, like you were going to need Graph. And did you try before you moved there with Postgres or ClickHouse trying to, create complex SQL queries or anything like that? Or did you just jump right in? You just knew Graph was the solution you wanted?
It was a multi-part. So, I had experience with Neptune in the previous role, which I think a lot of people do, great solution for a very specific use case. So that's, initially what we started with, just because it was there, we're an AWS ecosystem. It kind of made sense. But ultimately, I think a founder's job is to hire people smarter than you. So I hired, Max, and Max was pretty clear, like, hey, based off the roadmap and where we want to go, we're really going to struggle with deep graph traversal once we get into these large, complex environments where it's hundreds of thousands of users. People are literally in thousands of groups inside of Okta and Active Directory, and they have extremely vast permission sets, which is, we want to get down to the permission set level. And then, he kind of walked everyone through what we could do with the GDS library, and then really laid out a path for, look, we're early on. It's easier to do this now than, when you're a $10 million ARR company, but also knowing that the roadmap was to go to very agent-driven infrastructure, where allowing the agents to act on behalf and go in. Neo was ultimately going to be able to allow them to do that in a much more efficient manner. So we swapped early on, and are grateful that we did. Also, in my previous role, had a massive engineering team. And anyone who's ever done Neptune knows that, like most things in there, like it's a level of effort, not to just get it there, but to keep it there and have reliability engineering and everything on top of it. We're a small team here. We're a group of 8. So the ability to use Neo's hosted solution kind of allowed us to, skip forward 3 months and immediately focus on providing value to the customers and building the product instead of really worrying about the underlying infrastructure. And that stays true to this day, where keeping that up online ready is very little on our end, where we can focus on shipping features to the product, and ultimately trying to help customers solve complex problems.
Yeah, well, we are lucky that you chose Neo4j and that you have Max on your team to steer you in that direction for sure. And so you talked about a lot of different technologies there, like traversal efficiency, GDS, the ecosystem. I think you are using Aura Managed, right? If I'm correct about that.
Yeah.
So Aura Managed is one of most people, when they think of Neo4j, they think of the desktop version where Aura Manages are one of our newer cloud products.
That's the time to value right there, man. I mean, that was I think that the time it took us to do that versus the time it took us to stand up the initial versions of Neptune and get data in it is it's fundamentally a night and day experience. And I think that is extremely important, especially for startups who, time is everything. Like, time is the killer of all startups. And knowing that you have a vision, knowing what you want to build, hiring smart people, and giving them the ability to do what they want to do and say, hey, look, let's go now instead of let's spend a month or 6 weeks getting infrastructure in place to go do it, was critical. And Aura allowed us to do that. So
excellent. Yeah. And that's, love to hear that. And my team, that's one of the things we're doing is how can we get startups, right? Like you said, you have a few people, you have a small team, like, how can we get you rolling? There's infrastructure, like, especially with agents now, we have skills and we have all kinds of examples. So I mean, I love hearing about how we can let you start building quickly. I'd like to get a little bit more into your graph though. Right. So you're doing the ND resolution. Can you, if I'm someone that, if I'm a user in the system, like, what does the graph look like around me? I know I'm coming from multiple, like, what's a node? What's an edge here?
Yeah. So at the end, I think we'll do a little demo if that's okay, if we have time.
I would love to see that.
We'll walk you through it. So there's multiple views, but it's more not about the view, just to be very transparent. We have the views are there, they're aesthetically pleasing, they're quick wins. It's really about allowing the detection to be built on graph. So most of our detections are highly sophisticated, and they're also extremely complex because graph allows us to traverse multiple data sets and multiple nodes. So not just, hey, has Kevin logged in from XY, but has Kevin logged in from XY? Is Kevin not have MFA enabled, which now is pulling in data from SQL, but also is Kevin not logged in 30 days? And is Kevin a administrator in GitHub and or Salesforce, pulling in permissions data that's in graph? So it's yes, we have the graph, we'll go over the nodes and the edges, but it's the fundamental concept of not just how you view graph, but how graph drives our detection engine in general. So the ability to say, every detection is based off of a user, based off of an identity, use that canonical ID to then go ask all these other complex questions where we're running ClickHouse queries, we're running Postgres queries, we're running Cypher queries. Well, agents are all writing them. And then we have this orchestration layer that stitches them all together. That's how we are able to do what we do that you can't do in a SIEM today, and you can't do with your EDR and your NDR. And then, yes, we can show it to you for the analysts that want to deep dive and see, what does Brian have access to? What group gives him that access? What level of access does he have once he's logged in? That's kind of part of what we call our identity record. But in general, graph is much more than just the visualization of graph. It's the core of how the detection engine works. And combining that with the baselines that we do in ClickHouse is really, it's pretty amazing tech. So
yeah, awesome. So you're using Graph Data Science Library? Is there any secret sauce you can, like, certain algorithms that you guys are using that you can talk about, or is it just I don't
Yeah,
want to. I don't want to share full secrets.
you probably want Max for that one. Let's do
Yeah.
follow-up 2 next time, and we'll bring Max on.
All right, all right. Well, I will see you guys next week at
I'll
in
be
San
there.
Francisco. So
If he gives me the thumbs up, then I'll say it. I don't want to say it.
no, no, no. It's
Need
I understand.
Max's approval.
Completely. It's yeah, absolutely. I don't blame you. All right, so it sounds like so ND resolution. Oh, you know, another thing you talked about was this agents writing the cipher queries, right? And it's one of the things we've seen in the past. Like it, you know, I've worked with many customers. I've been in the graph industry for a while, and I know that a lot of times, like developers kind of wrapping their brain around writing cipher queries and graph queries when they come from like a relational world. Like it's thinking at it from different problem. But so how you've had a lot of success with agents writing those queries for you, right? And kind of reducing that work that curve.
Yeah, we struggled with it first when we started because we were using Postgres, and at the time, you know, we're trying to do identity resolution from a bunch of, you know, internal tables inside of Postgres. That obviously takes hundreds of lines of SQL, depending on the customer size and or the answer that was there. And while yeah, you could resolve, you know, identities in there. The code to generate the identity and the foundation of being able to do that and scaling it long term was never going to get us where we wanted to go. And, you know, frankly, a lot of it does have to do with cost. So agents use tokens, you know, the more in, the more out tokens. So as the world will struggle with in the next year or two, you can no longer cost based off the number of users and the number of integrations. It's all going to become usage. And, you know, when you have infrastructure that's writing extremely large, you know, SQL queries on the fly every single day via our inquiry page, versus what are predefined sniper level cipher queries. You know, there's a big fundamental difference when you think long term and compounding on, you know, 25,000 tokens versus 200,000 tokens per user per query, not just speed. So once we moved and we were able to feed, you know, you build your own tool. So we have a cipher tool that the agents use. You know, we were able to reduce hundreds, if not thousands of lines of SQL code down to a handful of pre-built cipher queries that allows the agents to go do what they do. And not only do it faster, do it more repeatable, do it better, but, you know, it's my job to also make sure it's, you know, cost like advantageous for us, and token usage is drastically reduced when you expose a tool like Neo and Cypher than using something like SQL, which ties to dollars.
Fantastic. So right now you're doing ND resolution and graph, right? That's kind of, I think, your first use case. Is there anything that's going to unlock next? Do you have more plans for graph, or are you just focus on ND resolution?
Yeah, no, when we get to the demo, I'll show you how, you know, we've got down to permission structures. Oh. So not you know, not saying permissions like your traditional IGA vendors. There's a lot of vendors that can go in there and do that, but being able to use those permission structures and build baselines and deviations from them, depending on the types of models that we may want to use with outlier detection. There are a few others that are in there. That opens up a whole nother level of detection that's not based off activity, but that's solely based off permissions and or changes in an environment. And, you know, your Gardeners and your Foresters may call that posture. We're big believers at Icite that, you know, posture and threat are related. It's hard to say posture of a user or posture of an environment without also understanding the threat of the user and the threat in the environment. And if posture goes up, then threat goes up. And if threat goes down, then posture goes down, et cetera, et cetera. And they should feed each other as part of the ultimate equation that gets bubbled up at the end of the day that goes into a blast radius. So being able to get into permission structures and build the same level of attack path within locally inside of an app permissions and build that blast radius and kind of impact analysis is what we're working on now. And we've got the fundamental level of exposing it. It's taking that same concept and redoing what we have done with our detections that are fundamentally based on identity resolution and reversing that to where it's based off the permission sets inside of each individual platform and asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's gonna be huge, right? Especially with AI agents now. Some agents have their own identities. Some are like, a user's utilizing the agent, so there might be a combination of identities there. Like being able to see into that. That's
the use case right there. Is right now I've got Claude running, I've got Codex running, I've got Copilot running. They all have access to varying things. Some of those things I've never even actually logged into. I've only ever created a token and given it access to. Other things I still manually log into every day. So it's being able to understand, does Wes's Claude tokens that he's using to go into GitHub and launch Darkly and Linear and ClickHouse and Neo, does it have the same level of access that actually Wes has inside of SCIM and the groups that have been provisioned inside of the roles? Or is there an overlap? Is there a drift where, that's where SCD drastically comes in, are these agents being given levels of permissions that the humans themselves don't even have because of how it's being provisioned, who's doing it? Maybe it's not automated through your SSO provider or your SCIM provider, whoever you're doing it, or your product owner just went in there and said, yes, I'm going to approve this token inside of GitHub that gives Wes a different level of access with his token than he would have if he logged in interactively. And that is going to allow us to do some really compelling stuff with what agents' identities are doing inside of a customer's environment versus their people that we already do really, really well today.
Excellent. So, you talked about the AI agents, and we talked about how, the Cypher queries are more efficient than the hundreds of lines of SQLs, which means less tokens. It's more easy. Is there any other benefit that Graph's getting you on those agents? Like, are you doing like traceability or of the data with the relationships, or anything else that you can talk about?
I would say it's the easeability of traversing and then doing fast assertions without the complexity associated with doing the same thing inside of a relational database. Agents do that really, really well. And exposing the tool, like you mentioned earlier, building the skill, having it know what to do, that is fundamentally different than trying to do that against a bunch of different Postgres relational databases. So being able to build that relationship and have them do those fast assertions is like kind of what agents were built to do, if you look at it. And it allows them to go really deep, really fast, where, in SQL, like, could you ultimately solve it? Yeah, you could. Those are very expensive queries. Those are very latency prone queries. Those are very brittle environments based off of, how you're doing your data, how your logs are in there, how your APIs work. And I'd say the big thing is, for us, we got the Icite MCP server. Like Graph is built for that. Like it was built to be given a tool by an agent to go in and say, go. That's it, just go. And the data's there, and it knows how to traverse it, it knows how to find it, it knows how to build it. More importantly, it understands the context to be able to present back to the user. Not that SQL is overly complicated, but if you send an agent down the wrong path, right, writing SQL statements, you're going to wind up with a wild card and a union at some point. And, that could be very problematic. So what we have found is building the tools with the agents to point at Graph. There's a couple blacklisted things we don't want them doing, but for the most part, you can give them free reign and they're going to figure it out and they're going to do it really, really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm always up for a good demo, and I'm a bit of a cybersecurity nerd myself. So if you don't mind showing us a little bit about what Icite looks like, I'm gonna switch over and
let's do
let you share your desktop. I think
the demo gods. All right.
Yeah. Well,
let's see here. Share screen.
Yeah. Let me know if you can share it.
Oh God, my IT guy may freak out if it tries to ask for permissions. No.
Well, I added you, so hopefully.
All right, can we see?
I believe, yeah, I can see it. So hopefully, if you can't see it at home, drop a note in the chat. But I think we're good to go.
So I don't want to go into full-on sales mode. I don't think that's why we're here, and that's probably not why people join. So we'll kind of dive into the graphy aspects of it. But the core, what I was trying to talk about earlier, was the ability to do the detections the way that we do the detections. So in this case, this is a very popular use case. This is, someone leaving an environment where we pull in data from their HRIS. We also pull in some permission data from local apps. Then we combine it with time series data. So we've essentially, in this case, we're leveraging all three data sources. So we've got events, we've got configs, we've got graph. But the importance of here is this query, this detection, is impossible without the ability to do identity resolution. And that's that concept of Wes shows up differently in his logs from GitHub, from GitLab, from Salesforce, from insert 30 other common SaaS apps when they get sent to the SIEM, or they get sent to Databricks, or they get sent to Snowflake, or whatever your flavor of the month is. So the SIEM will fundamentally never truly have a concept of an identity in there, which is why they have extremely high false positive and low efficacy rating. So this is what really powers, I would say, the core of the product, is the ability to do that resolution on the fly. Now here, this looks very, it's aesthetically pleasing, the way that we lay it out for the users. But behind the scenes, this is when you go in, you interact with our agents. What we're really doing is pulling in Kevin's graph. And this is where things get super sexy. We can see Kevin and all of Kevin's locals accounts, because these are SaaS apps that we have been connected to. So we know, like, Kevin is actually added to Salesforce via his email address that an admin has added him to, versus SCIM provisioning that's happened via Okta, Entra, or Google. And we can take the concept of an identity, which is Kevin, but look at all his individual entities that are in 3 other IDPs, and then how they are kind of being presented. Now, what that then allows us to do is actually pull in Kevin's real identity record. So this is where we take it and we make it aesthetically pleasing for an analyst or an incident responder to come in and see. We put the icons, we put the groups, but this is where who Kevin is, how Kevin is coming in, what groups is given Kevin this access. And all of this is what's being driven to then do the level of detections that we do, including your local assets. What are you using on your phone? What are you using on your laptop? Now, what I was talking about earlier, this is where things are kind of going for us, is we can combine the time series data on top of it. So you can see last login immediately. Are they using this app? This leads into a whole nother feature set of, well, if Kevin's not logging in the Jamf in 155 days, why does he have access? That's kind of that posture level, that governance level. If people have access to systems they're not using, remove their access and change that back to just in time. So when they want it, they get it, but don't leave it dormant, don't leave it sitting there. But being able to go into something like Salesforce and dynamically pull in on the fly his local entitlements. This is really complex stuff. So to be able to pull it in directly for a user that has been given local access to something, and then build that relationship to tie it back to Kevin at Icite.io in relation to everything else, and pull in not only the role that he has in there, but what each of those individual resources he gets access to. So this, right now, we have the ability to do for every one of your integrated apps. What that's going to become down the road is being able to do CRUD level detections based off of toxic combinations and varying levels of permissions inside of apps to do not only attack path, kind of analysis, but posture down the road on, should these people have this level of access? Because if they have this and they have that, that's going to ultimately lead to this. Mm-hmm. So the ability to go in, make proactive decisions for the customers, ultimately what will become recommendations. And, it's kind of there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff in here that you can get to, but the crux of the product is graph. And that's what drives the user experience today.
Fantastic. Yeah. So let's so I guess so you're doing like blast radius, you're doing analysis, like all these tools, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to share a QR code here on the screen. So if anybody wants to check out Icite's website, they can scan that QR code
That's
and
dope. I like that. Yeah. Right.
And we try to
Yeah.
aim to please here. So and
Sweet.
let people find out more. Now, a couple of questions I want to kind of wrap up with are, where's Icite today? Is there any big customers you can talk about that you're protecting? Like what's resonating with your customers? Where are you at?
Yeah. Not going to name customer names. Probably could have if we would have discussed that beforehand and had some paperwork signed. But
Yes.
we're in telecom, manufacturing, cybersecurity, so to say. I think they're all using us for the exact same use case. They've invested in traditional ITDR. They have a SIEM, they have a SOAR, they have an MDR provider. But at the end of the day, their analysts still get a bunch of detections that don't have context. Not only do they not have context, they don't have relationships. And an alert on Monday that's closed out by analyst one, the person that closed out an alert in 14 days from another vendor, from another analyst, they have no idea that those events are associated with each other. That is what we allow them to do today, is say, hey, you can now associate all these events, all these identities, all these assets back through a period of 3 to 6 to 9 months and really tell a compelling story. That's what it's about. It's storytelling. It's the ability to pull on a thread and pull on that thread without going to your Okta team or your Microsoft team or your SailPoint team, or in a lot of cases going to individual product owners to say, well, what level of access does Brian have to Salesforce? When was the last time Brian logged into Workday, and is he admin, is he not? It's that ability to self-service and allow their analysts to, confidently make decisions on the fly, knowing that almost every detection that comes in their SOC at some point has something to do with an identity.
So it's that. I imagine it also helps a lot with the noise, right? Reducing the noise, because you have, a lot of times these tools are very
The big
chatty.
contract of ours is low volume, high fidelity. There's not a lot of times where people are logging into Icite just to log into Icite. They are logging in to do something because Icite has told them there is something to do. Now, a lot of the permission stuff we just talked about, that's going to open up a whole new use case, which will probably be more geared towards the identity team, the privacy team, the risk team. But today, our sole focus is helping the SOC, like do what they need to do with less tools and faster and more confidence.
And that's amazing. So what's next for you guys? I know we talked a little bit beforehand that we're both going to be in San Francisco for Graph Talk San Francisco next week. But what else where can people find you? What's any big things coming up?
Let's say that the next big one will be Black Hat. So we'll be out at Black Hat in Vegas and DEF CON. So we'll stay all the way through. So yeah, I'll be in San Francisco next week, hanging out with Brian and team. But outside of that, then we'll be at Black Hat in Vegas. So if anybody wants to hang out, drop us a note. We'll be there in full force. So, and I have to ask Brian before we get off, that moose behind you, did you take that picture?
Yeah, man, he's like right in my back. No, no, that was a gift from my wife. She decided I needed some more art in my office. So
I was going to say, that's a bold picture. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good stuff.
Yeah, no, but it is. I have been to Ireland. You can also see the gap of the gap of Dunlow back there, and I live in the Finger Lakes. Right now, actually, it's kind of post-apocalyptic with there's wildfires in southern Canada that are blowing smoke, and it's like it's like something out of a movie here. So you can't see out the window, but it's they're like, hey, don't go outside. I'm like, that's good because I have a podcast to do. So yeah, awesome, right? So I look forward to meeting you in person next week, and thanks. I think everybody here has seen the Icite. I'm also going to share, if people aren't familiar with our startup program, you can see that links up there now. Feel free to scan that, and you can get credits. You can do a bunch of things, get support and stuff from my team and co-marketing, things like this, in fact, that you could do as well. So thanks, Wes. Everybody check out Icite, and we'll be back to you next month, third Thursday, 12 o'clock Eastern. And thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.